When we engage in the spiritual practices of prayer and empowerment, we are committing to daily focused times of prayer, specifically with the conviction that God has chosen those who live in worldly poverty to be rich in faith and to inherit His kingdom. Not only that, but we also pray in the expectation that God will do great things in and through people who live in communities experiencing poverty. So why are the practices of prayer and empowerment important for redemptive poverty work? Often when we work in communities of poverty, we witness a lot of injustice and suffering. This can cause us to ask God, why aren't you intervening? Instead of seeing God at work in these areas, we assume the role as fixer, often taking on additional responsibilities when we should be equipping individuals in the community. Prayer and empowerment address these problems head on. Instead of seeing circumstances as bigger than God, we see God as bigger than the circumstances and pray for Him to continue His work. Instead of believing that our own role is crucially important, we acknowledge that this is God's work and we expect Him to do great things in communities experiencing poverty. So how does prayer and empowerment address the potential for toxic poverty work? When we make it our responsibility to solve poverty-related issues, fix injustice, or change lives, we put the focus on us and our power instead of Christ and His power. This leads us to the mindset of Savior syndrome. In and of ourselves, we cannot solve the problems and issues faced by those living in communities experiencing poverty. When we pursue these problems in our own strength, we will hurt those we serve and become burned out and cynical. Only God can change lives and communities. He uses us through His church to establish His kingdom in hard places. Our work in communities experiencing poverty move forward by prayer to a God who empowers those in poverty to do great things. Early in my ministry, I recognized that my reach and effectiveness were constrained by factors such as language barriers, cultural understanding, experience, and time. When I began facilitating leadership retreats for women in under-resourced communities, I discovered that empowering these women to conduct retreats within their own communities allowed for broader and more effective training. By enabling women to lead in their own language and cultural context, my role shifted from being the primary leader and teacher to one of coaching, equipping, and supporting from behind the scenes. This approach significantly expanded our reach, enabling us to impact more women across various communities throughout the United States. True empowerment necessitates personal sacrifice. We must be willing to step aside and let those we have mentored and trained assume leadership roles, even if their methods differ from our own. We rely on prayer and trust that God will work in them and through them to accomplish His will. This process requires substantial prayer, as empowering others demands the discernment and wisdom that can only be attained through consistent and dedicated time spent in communion with the Lord.